By discarding God, the floodgates of indecency have been thrown open, leaving in their wake a generation numbed to the beauty of authentic love and blinded to the allure of fleeting pleasures.
To continue the case for side proposition, I call on Dr. Yasir Qadhi.
Bismillah. Mr. President, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, I apologize, I have a cough for a few weeks. It is my privilege to speak at this illustrious house at Oxford Union. Allow me to begin on a personal note. It was precisely 20 years ago, to the very month, that I first visited this historic campus when I had applied for and was successfully accepted to the doctoral program at Religious Studies. Personal circumstances forced me to pursue my PhD elsewhere, but I confess that I have always carried a soft, nostalgic spot for Oxford, and I'm absolutely delighted that I'm speaking here today. However, I must say that on YouTube, your chamber looks far bigger than it actually is. The motion that I'm arguing in defense of is, this house regrets the death of God. Now, obviously, for the record, as a person of faith, I strongly disagree with the phrasing of the motion, even as I support its sentiment. Declaring God is dead simply because society has grown distant from faith is rather like claiming that the sun has ceased to shine simply because we are stubbornly refusing to open our eyes and see the truth. God's existence is not contingent upon our acknowledgement of him. But I do find it fascinating that even in his supposed death, he continues to provoke such fervent discussion. One might almost think him quite alive, especially in the minds of those who deny him. One other final caveat before I begin my actual points. Simply because of my own training and affiliation with the faith of Islam, most of my references will be from my own tradition, but I do believe that the arguments that I'm using are universal to almost all faiths. Now, the question arises, by what metrics are we going to judge the claim that belief in God brings benefit to individuals and society? In other words, how does one go about measuring whether society is worse off or not because it has lost religion? I believe that benefits in believing in God can be categorized into three separate and distinct categories. Firstly, those benefits that can reasonably be demonstrated and proven in an observable experimental manner. Secondly, there are also benefits that, while they cannot be proven scientifically, all people of conscience will be able to appreciate and recognize. And lastly, I admit there are also many benefits that are real but metaphysical and hence, by definition, require faith. Let me give you examples for all three of these categories. In the first category, there is an overwhelming quantity of sociological, anthropological, and psychological studies that have demonstrated credible evidence that an absence of faith is detrimental to both individual and society. I have over here references to over a dozen specific articles, peer-reviewed journals, meta-analytical studies and surveys that has collectively tapped into hundreds of research projects from around the globe involving multiple faiths and different cultures and different ethnicities, all of which demonstrate that belief in God typically translates into a better perception of well-being, of self-esteem, a better mental state, and yes, even better physical health. Overall satisfaction with the quality of one's life. And that belief in God, generally speaking, lowers the risk of hypertension, depression, criminal delinquency, suicide, and a host of other factors. As well, a number of studies have also shown that people who believe in God are generally far more altruistic and charitable and contribute more to civil society. Hence, there is plenty of evidence to make a strong, plausible, and I say here plausible because I understand it's not watertight, a strong, plausible scientific claim that society and individuals benefit when faith is prominent and central, and that they suffer when it is not. The second category of benefits are those areas in which religion does add value And yet they cannot be proven, because not everything can be proven by physics or chemistry or economics. Not every virtue can be objectively quantified or mathematically proven. Yet we as a species have universal values of nobility. We understand what is dignity. We appreciate decency. And these are the values that religion most importantly promotes and preserves. Societies that have discarded religion are clearly seeing the consequences of that. And nowhere is this moral collapse more evident than in the realm of family and the changing attitudes towards sex, sexuality, and modesty. Religion's focus on sexual morality stems from its role, its vital role, its inherent role in providing a framework for human behavior that promotes social stability, personal dignity, and communal harmony. When you remove religion, when you remove God, without moral boundaries, sexual behavior will lead to exploitation, to betrayal, and to societal disarray. It is only belief in God that allows us to empathize, that allows us to emphasize virtues such as chastity, fidelity, and self-control, thus allowing individuals to be protected from the emotional, psychological, and social consequences of unchecked indulgence. I apologize, I'm not accustomed to this point of information, so I'm gonna have to wait to the end. Sorry. By discarding God, the floodgates of indecency have been thrown open, leaving in their wake a generation numbed to the beauty of authentic love and blinded to the allure of fleeting pleasures. It is no coincidence that this descent into moral chaos has paralleled the decline of religiosity in modern life. The breaking up of the family unit, the increase of the casual hookup culture, the proliferation of pornography, the grotesque phenomenon of platforms like OnlyFans has turned what should be sacred into a mere commodity to be bought and sold. The physical bodies of men, and especially women, and the very sacred and personal act of human intimacy, which should be protected and celebrated within the confines of marriage, are instead reduced to objects of voyeuristic consumptions, parading their vulnerability for profit in a world that is increasingly celebrating their degradation as empowerment. This perversion has only corroded individual lives. This perversion has not only corroded individual lives, it has also shattered the bonds of intimacy and respect that underpin healthy relationships. Because we have removed God from the public discourse, we live in an age where virtue is mocked and vice is exalted, where a young woman of grace and intelligence is told that flaunting her body and shedding her clothes is worth exponentially more than the talents of her mind and the nurturing of her soul. The tragedy is not merely that we have embraced depravity, but that we have done so while pretending to not recognize its stench and decay. To mention but one recent example, we have just recently witnessed the grotesque spectacle of a performer degrading herself before the world, claiming to publicly broadcast online, for a fee of course, her bacchanalian depravity with over 1,000 men in the span of one day. Mainstream global media helped publicize and launch this event, and claims of world records being achieved were broadcast as if the turnaround in quantity of partners per hour indicates success. When society no longer blushes at such brazen indecency, when it celebrates filth as entertainment, and it equates self-exploitation with success, one must ask, how far have we fallen? You don't need science to tell us something is very, very wrong with this reality. And the fact of the matter is that you need to bring in God in order to have those checks and balances. To revel in the sheer magnitude of debauchery as if it were an achievement rather than a lamentable indictment of modern decay is not an expression of liberation, but the final surrender of morality to hedonism. A society that abandons God also abandons moral law that sustains the soul. Or, as the Prophet ﷺ said, if you have no shame, then do as you please. Thirdly and lastly, there are areas in which belief in God is indeed of value, but these areas are outside the realm of scientific inquiry. Here, I refer to the role of faith in decisively answering the ultimate questions of life and of providing existential purpose and of giving meaning not only to the lives that we currently live, but to the mystery and meaning of death itself. For those who reject God, as Nietzsche himself said, do you not see that by negating him, you have deprived yourselves of a true and enduring purpose? I mean, you strive valiantly, I admit, to carve meaning from this chaos, to weave nobility into the fabric of a world you insist has no weaver. Yet, in this attempt, you yourselves exhibit a kind of faith, not in a higher power, but in the constructs of your own imagination. You all believe in justice, and yet you claim that justice is a mere human invention. You all cherish love, and yet you understand that love is nothing other than the mere dance of chemicals in a fleeting frame. You have chosen deliberately to close your eyes to the possibility that this very magnificent tapestry of creation whispers, nay, screams of the existence of its creator. And by doing so, you have deprived yourselves of the very meaning of your own existence. To live without God is to live in a world in which every triumph, every joy, every fleeting moment of beauty must be propped up by a narrative you know to be temporary, fragile, and ultimately futile, and where every single moment of pain or sadness has no higher purpose or ultimate consolation. The irony is that those who have rejected the most obvious explanations of life are forced to have faith in their own imaginary constructs in an attempt to create meaning in a world that they claim is meaningless. For those who embrace faith, about to finish, life is imbued with a profound sense of direction and significance, offering a sanctuary of hope, a framework for understanding the mysteries of the universe. And when death comes, as it must to all, it does not appear as the abyss of nothingness, but rather as the door to the fulfillment of all that we have sought, the embrace of the one who has set our hearts longing for him from the very beginning. To believe in God, to submit to God, is to awaken the greatest of all truths, that we are not orphans in an indifferent cosmos, but beloved children called to something higher, meant for something greater, and destined at last for an eternal glory and a divine pleasure that does not fade. And that, my dear friends, is the ultimate measure of success. So while this third and most important category cannot be proven by science, allow me to conclude by paraphrasing a famous passage of the Quran in which the Quran says, "Do not be like those who have abandoned God, for when they do so, He has caused them to abandon themselves, and those are the most wretched and unfortunate." Belief in God, submission to God, liberates the heart and mind. It brings life to the soul and mercy to society, while abandoning Him destroys the very purpose of our existence and ruptures the very fabric of society. Thank you very much.